if I have a group of people in my home, that doesn't make it a church. But if we continue to come back and we're focused on spiritual growth and nurture, whatever that looks like, then that makes it a church.
All right. Hey, everybody. We are broadcasting this live on Twitch, theChurch.digital. We're doing our new show here. Now, Joey Santos is usually in here to mock me for this part of the show. We're going to actually say the name of the title. We've got our guest, Ann Bosarge, on. We'll get to Ann in a second. But we're on the new show called Wait, That's a Church. You see, Ann, that's how I normally say it. And then Joey laughs at me because that's like the ridiculous way that I talk, I guess. I don't know, but that's the show. And so, hey, you're on Wait, That's a Church. I don't even know what episode we're on, maybe episode 8. And really what we do with this the show is really highlight unique expressions of church. They've been tending to be a little digital, a little micro, some different approaches towards that. Some virtual, Joey's doing the church at a bar. And so it's been a lot of that type of feel as we're talking about, churches that don't look like the typical brick and mortar church. And the one thing that we do believe is that to do something different, we need to do something different in order to reach someone different. And we're seeing that time and time again in micro spaces and digital spaces. And so, hey, we do have stumbling in at the last minute. Joey Santos is joining us for the show. Hey, Joey, how's it going?
Doing good, Jeff. How you doing? Hey, Ann.
Hey.
You are, Joey, okay, let's just call this out right now. Where are you? You're like outside in nature and there's like green stuff and like what's going on?
I'm at the church, the bar headquarters.
That's a tough life, man. You're like out and about. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I sat right there, right?
Exactly.
Was that where I was?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a tough life, Joey. It's a tough life for you, man. Right there at the water, on the clock, doing this conversation. So,
can I complain about
gorgeous. Meanwhile, the rest of us are like toiling way hard at work. And so anyway, enough about Joey evidently in this conversation. Hey, Ann, how are you doing?
I'm good. I wish I was where Joey was, but I'm good. It's a rainy day here in South Georgia, so just
man,
inside. Yep.
So we all need to go to Ohio. You're in Ohio, right, Joey?
Exactly, Mainville, Ohio.
Yeah, we all Ohio. I never really thought there was much in Ohio. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but evidently there's a bar on a canal that's worth hanging out at.
Exactly.
So Ann, let's set the stage a little bit, and you are, you're a little like me. You wear a lot of different hats, and so, it was funny, ironic. Just earlier this morning, Ann came on and talked to the church digital leadership about some of the stuff that she's doing digitally, with the chapel online and with a digital discipleship, and we're not going. And she's built a remarkable digital church discipleship community that's ministering to people on multiple continents. Like it's phenomenal to see what she's been able to do. But that is not what we're going to talk about today. And so instead, Ann just maybe mentioned something in passing to me about a micro church that she's doing in partnerships with a physical church and a denomination. And I just was like, whoa, I want to better understand that. That's not a passing throwaway comment. It's like a big deal. And so, Ann, maybe to set it up, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and all the things that you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So I am the Director of Leadership Strategies and Local Church Resources for the South Georgia Conference of the United Methodist Church. That's the official title, and I will not quiz you on that at the end of this podcast. But so that is one of the things that I do in my work. That is my primary job. And in addition, then I run digital discipleship as a nonprofit. And so, Jeff, you and I normally talk about digital discipleship and all the things we have going on there. And the other day, we got to talk about what I do in my full-time job, my full-time work with the denomination. And I work in South Georgia as a church planter, a cultivator of new things, fresh expressions, and home churches is kind of what got your interest up. And so, one of the things that we have been doing in South Georgia as a result of some of the shakeup that's been going on in our denomination, we are having the opportunity to start a lot of new things. And so I'm planting a lot of churches with some really strong laity. I have the opportunity to do some work around fresh expressions, which I know that y'all have talked to Michael Beck and all of the amazing things that he is doing in fresh expressions. And so we're following his footsteps with some really cool expressions of church. But then one of the unique things that we are doing here in South Georgia is we're doing something that we call home churches. And
Hmm.
that is kind of that micro expression of church that you and I were talking about.
It's interesting, and when denominations, organizations, churches, when they're in crisis mode, where they fall back on innovation, and when they're not in crisis mode is when they, I don't want to say get lazy, but maybe comfortable is a better word. They like kind of stay in their comfort zone a little bit. And so it's interesting as this denomination's, struggling, that's when they're leaning into thinking outside of the box and being more innovative in that. And so, talk to us a little more about the idea of this home church. Like, what is it? What does it look like? Who's doing it? How popular is the idea? Like, give us some background and framework.
For sure. So, as I have been talking to people around our conference, around our area, about what God might be doing in them to kind of lead something new, start something new, I give them a couple of options, and home church is one of the options that I give them. And really, when we talk about home church, the way that we set that up is it becomes a micro expression of church that meets in a home, or it could meet, in a bar, Joey, or some other location.
Yeah.
But it is a micro expression of church that meets for discipleship and worship. And we tend to encourage people to meet in their homes because, just like the early church in Acts, we know that the home is just a really intimate, comfortable place for people to gather and to open up and to be authentic about growth and faith. And the other thing that we know about home church is that for many people, it is much more invitational for people who would never go to a traditional church. So people who would not step foot in a church because of a myriad of reasons, right? Maybe they have no church experience. Maybe they've had a bad experience with church, for any number of reasons. They sometimes feel more comfortable coming into the home of a friend or the home of a friend's friend and having some conversation and usually a meal or some food or something like that. So we run those whichever day of the week works best for your community. And that's another beautiful thing, is that home church can happen during the week, or it can happen on the weekend. It could happen in the day or the evening, whatever works for your schedule. And what we do is we recognize that it's important for our home churches that are often run by laity that we have trained to be leaders, for them to be tied into an existing church, kind of to be tethered. That is one of the ideas that we got from Fresh Expressions and the work that they do, because Fresh Expressions are always tethered to an existing established church. And so that is how it works with our home churches as well. And we have found that people who have experienced home church hurt from their other previous church have really engaged with home churches. People who are new to faith have engaged with home churches. We have in my own home church. So 2 years ago, I started a home church because I started encouraging people to think about what it would look like for us to start home churches in South Georgia. And I thought, you know what? I guess I better pay attention and actually know what I'm talking about. And so I should probably have a home church myself if I'm going to tell somebody else to have one. So we were the first ones that started a home church, and we next month will turn 2 years old with the people in our home church. And so we have very much figured it out as we have gone along, but we have started several others here in South Georgia, and they are all at various levels of growth, but all extremely healthy and very authentic and doing well.
So what is like either your house church or some of the others in there? What is a service look like? Is it a full band on stage watching YouTube videos for worship, video preaching, live preaching, just conversation dialogue for a growth time? Like walk me through maybe some of the elements.
Yeah, so all of the above. And each home church is a little bit different based on their community, the community of the people that are gathered there, and based on the host that is the host church that is hosting them. So the way that it works, well, I'll give you an example of my home church first and then tell you about a couple of others. So for my home church, we are hosted by Encounter Church, which is in Rincon, and I am located in Brunswick, Georgia. So Rincon, Georgia is about an hour and 15 minutes up the road from my house. So geographically, it's not like we could go to Encounter Church on a Sunday morning regularly and worship there. So what we thought was that we would bring Encounter Church to our town and do that in the form of a home church. So we gather together on Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock. And we have breakfast together first. So, like all the early Christians, the emphasis was on food. We still keep that. We keep that DNA together. We have some good breakfast, some kind of potluck time, lots of coffee. We sit down in the living room with all of our plates and we share stories and we catch up throughout the week. And then we turn on the TV and we do worship with some of the music that I provide from the nonprofit with digital discipleship. And we do a couple of worship songs. And there are so many people that say, well, and people don't sing if it's online and you're watching in your living room. And I'm like, then y'all should come to my home church because we sing loud. And I think that the thing that made the difference for us was that the very first home church, when the music came on, I started singing loud. And
Yeah.
everybody's like, well, I'm not going to let Ann be the only one singing loud. And then everybody sang loud. And then that's just who we are. So we're constantly turning up the volume on the remote so we can actually hear the music. But we do 2 songs and then we go to YouTube and we watch a video that James P. Owens, who is the lead pastor of Encounter Church in Rincon, has prepared especially for home church viewing.
Oh,
So
wow.
the thing that makes it different from what he does in person is, first of all, it's a little bit shorter. So, when you're watching something online, your attention span tends to be a little bit less than if you were there in person. So it's a very close shot of James, so it feels like he's in our living room. And usually that message is between 15 and 20 minutes long. We try to keep it in that time frame. And then after that, we have Encounters worship leader Sarah, who does a response song. And once again, we sing. And then at the very end of that, we usually have a prayer. And I ask one question, and this is the question that kind of guides the rest of our time together, is how does what you just heard apply to your life today? So what are you doing with this? This thing that we've heard, this truth that we have uncovered, what are you doing with that in your life this week? And we begin to have a conversation around that. And if you were in our home church, you would notice that just about everybody has their physical Bible and they have a journal and a pen, and we're taking notes and we're writing things down. It's a very active engagement kind of time. And then we refer to those when we have our conversation at the end. And so we do a lot of discipleship after the fact, where we talk about, what did you hear? What stood out to you? What questions do you still have? And then after that, it depends on how people have responded, but sometimes we'll do a special prayer moment where we pray for somebody that's going through a particular time, or sometimes we'll talk about something that we can do in the community, or however else we can put what we've heard into action. And I think the beautiful thing for us is that many times pastors will give these amazing messages with really tangible next steps. And the minute people leave the building, they have already made excuses of why they're not going to follow through and do that thing. But for us in home church, we've literally said, no, this is what I'm going to do with that this week. And then the next week when we get together, guess what? We ask each other, did you actually do that thing that you said you were going to do that week? How did that conversation go? And so I believe that follow through, that immediate follow through and accountability is very key in our discipleship process. So that's what it looks like at our home church. We also will gather together for Friendsgiving and game nights and those kinds of fun things as well, which are also important aspects of being the church. And we have a mission organization that we all support, a child sponsorship organization that we have through digital discipleship. And so we are all sponsor parents, and we do that work together. And if there are needs, we come together and meet those needs. So we have that missional mindedness as well. So that's what it looks like if you come to the Bosarge home church on a Sunday morning. We have another home church in South Georgia that is about to turn 2 as well. They started just like a week after we started our home church, and they are more traditional in nature. So they are in Albany, Georgia. Their host church is Trinity United Methodist Church in Savannah, and they are actually 4 hours apart geographically. And so Trinity does a really great job through the leadership of their pastor, Ben Gosden, to provide a very interactive service. And the Albany home church watches live. So they watch the live stream, and they actually interact with the worshipers in Savannah through that virtual connection. So for instance, whenever Ben does the prayers of the people, which you would have in a more traditional service, he says, go on Facebook and submit your prayers. And so even the people in the pews are going on Facebook and submitting their prayers along with the people in Albany at the home church. And then he's reading those out loud. So bringing together the whole congregation of
Wow.
believers in a very interactive way. Yeah.
I love that. That's very
Yeah.
cool.
It's very cool. It's a really beautiful thing. So they go through the whole liturgy, and they have the hymnals there. They have all of the things that they can use to interact together. And they actually meet, so not in their home, but outside their home. They have this little covered area that they call the tabernacle. And the really neat thing is they called it the tabernacle before they started a home church there. So all of a sudden they were like, we're meeting in the tabernacle, which is right next to a pool. So if they ever need to do baptisms, it's really convenient. And on Sundays in the summer, they can have little pool parties afterwards. So it's a really neat situation for them there. But they also turn 2 in just a couple of weeks. So it's a beautiful expression. And I think it's one of the things that I like about it is that it's so flexible depending on the host church and depending on the home church, how you typically would prefer to engage in worship. Ours is a more free expression, I would say, because we don't have it highly structured, except for the food and the sermon. The rest of it, we can kind of play around with, whereas theirs is a more traditional flow of worship. And then they have a time to talk and chat, and they also have coffee and food. And So that's what it looks like in some of our expressions.
Well, I'm curious what Joey's thinking listening to this. You know, Joey and
Uh,
I have both worked for established churches that were trying to integrate micro, and we just it didn't work. Like there was a separation of vision in a lot of that. And so when I hear a success, like I'm really encouraged because
yeah.
I know the power that can happen here. And so Joey, you know, as you're hearing this, what are you thinking?
I was thinking about that, Jeff. It's just so much you unpacked out of what you just shared. There's so many angles. Uh, but I wanna end. I want to start looking back a little bit on the overall organization you're working for. What caused them to embrace this this step? Like, what was the conversation like that led into, hey, let's look into micro churches. Let's look into what the opportunities, what expressions can we embrace out there. So how was that conversation and how that all unfolded uh, to put into action?
Yeah, so originally, when I came on board in the role of congregational development, church revitalization, we were in a budget crunch. So we could not do the same things that we did before. We were in a time of transition, so we needed to do something different and we needed to be creative. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure that the phrase is necessity is the mother of invention or something like that. And that was so true in our context. We were ready because we had to be ready to do something new. And so I went to our cabinet and our bishop and I said, look, I want to be able to plant churches that look a little bit different than the way that we have done it in the past. And so everything that we began to do in church planting looked a little bit different. And so it wasn't just, oh, Anne has this crazy idea. No, a whole new strategy is needed. And we know that we're ready for that. And so it was the right time at the right moment. And it was the willingness of the people that I was working with to be able to say, let's try this thing because Anne has an idea here that just might work. And I told him, I said, it may not work. You know, we may meet for a couple of months, but that's fine. Then we'll figure something else out. You know, what do we have to lose in getting together on a Sunday morning with a group of people, some who may have been far from church for a long time, others who may have felt disconnected by their church? What do we have to lose in this experiment? And so we realized that we didn't have anything to lose except for maybe some constraints that we had put in our mindsets around what church was and how it could operate. And once we began to loosen those and began to explore it, then what we did was the next step was to reach out to particular churches that we felt like would be good hosts for a home church. So, not every church in our conference is ready to host a home church. So, you've got to have the right mindset. You have to have a good understanding. You have to understand that having a home church is not a way to, quote, grow your church. It is a way to expand the kingdom. And so we're not trying to add home churches to host churches just to boost the, quote, online attendance or something like that. It really is, it comes from a kingdom mindset. And so I think that is the other thing that we had to start casting a vision for, is this is the heart behind which we are doing this work, and this is what is going to be required in order to partner together with one of these home churches.
No, that's, I think that's incredible because it is a very kingdom mindset that is required to look at things that way. I know this is going to sound very like churchy, probably language, but after all this time, this years doing it, do you guys talk about like how do you measure success? How do you quantify? Um, it's not about the numbers they're drawing back to the church, but what is the success measure for you guys in looking at church expressions as a way to expand the kingdom?
Yeah. So I think when we talk about micro church, we need to look at really look at micro success. Okay, so I'll give you a success story from just a couple of weeks ago from one of our smaller home churches that's just about a half an hour south from me. And I'm actually driving tomorrow to meet that home church leader. So I'm going to tell him that I gave him a shout out on this podcast. um, but he and his home church have been praying for this man that lives behind their house. He lost his wife after a long illness. It was a couple of months ago, and Jeff and the rest of the home church attenders have really been praying for him. And Jeff has had conversations around the fence, by the fence with this man. And they went and took him food when his wife died. And he texted me just 2 weeks ago and he said, this guy showed up at our home church this morning and I think he's going to be back. So for me, those are the kinds of stories that we are looking at. For me, that is success. They have been praying for this man for probably almost a year and he showed up. And one of the things that I think is that in a traditional church mindset, we are so focused on addition of numbers, addition of numbers, addition of numbers. And here we're able in a microcosm to see particular growth points of people within our home church, because you're not able, you don't have to say, well, we added X number of people to our home church group, but I can say in this person's life, this is the actual growth I see, this is the spiritual fruit I see. And have we added people to our home church? Yes. As a matter of fact, last year we baptized 3 people from our home church. But to me, the beautiful thing is then being able to see those people that have been baptized grow deeper in their faith as a result of the connection that they have with our group. So really, I think that our quote growth numbers are really more observations, and it's not necessarily can we get to a certain number, because I'm not looking, I mean, my house is small, so it's not like I'm going to try to move from 15 to 20 next year. We wouldn't make it, right? But I also think that if we get to that point, then let's launch a new home church. That is the growth point. Is what do we do when we reach there? Well, then we launch something new. But I think that the measurement is much more organic and grassroots and personal than the typical measurements that we think about in terms of people in seats and tithes given. And how many people are in a group. So those things don't necessarily are not the best measurements for discipleship anyway. And when we look at a micro expression, it really needs to be something that is more personal.
What makes, in your mind, when we've had plenty of conversations about minimal ecclesiology, and it feels like the micro expressions. Michael Beck was teaching community mission like that. That seems to be the popular. Alan Hirsch kind of has that as his core foundation. What makes a micro church a church? Like, what's the standard for you within the denomination of, okay, that's a church versus, okay, that's just a bunch of people having a party and hanging out together? Like, what makes it actually a church?
So I think it is a group of people that regularly commit to coming together for spiritual growth and nurture. So for me, it's the regularity of it.
Okay.
If I have a group of people in my home, that doesn't make it a church. But if we continue to come back and we're focused on spiritual growth and nurture, whatever that looks like, then that makes it a church. And so for me, it doesn't have to be a 15 to 20-minute sermon. It doesn't have to include music. It doesn't have to include all of these things, which is kind of Michael Beck's approach with Fresh Expressions that I love so much, is that the point is that we regularly gather together for the purpose of spiritual growth and nourishment. And it's that regularity, it's that rhythm of relationship that I think is so important. My husband, so he obviously comes to our home church whenever he is home. He has the recliner, and when he's not there, then people come in and they're like, "Is Corey here? Because I want the recliner today." But my husband Corey, he works as an official for softball, usually girls softball on the weekends. And so a lot of think about all of the talk in church world about how weekend sports, Sunday sports is killing the church. Well, my husband is out there and he is helping to officiate some of those games. And he actually started a fresh expression of church that we call Church. And he takes all of the umpires together that usually travel together every single weekend, and he gathers them together on Sunday morning for a prayer time and a little devotional verse of the day and a couple of sentences. And they have an ongoing group chat that they will chat in throughout the week. And that is a church. It is a regular rhythm of believers coming together for the purpose of spiritual growth and worship. And I cannot tell you how many people have seen Corey gathering those umpires together for Church, and their hearts have been warmed and changed because of that. So I think to me, it's the rhythm, it's the regular accountability of seeking to grow in faith together as a community.
It's beautiful.
It is, and I really like the idea of you don't, they don't follow a certain model. So I'm assuming every house church will adjust to their community and doing what's needed. Uh, and I think that it's such an important part of the microchurch experience that um, the different locations they express themselves different ways without altering the essence of it. That's the Bible, that's Christ, that's God is the center focus of the church. Uh, and where do you see what expansion looks like to you guys? Like I know you're probably going to say more micro churches, but um, but like in a very like big picture, like where do you see this going? Like I mean, or is something that you guys are just like you're gonna let just go and see where God takes, or is there a bigger vision from where you are right now that you and your organization is working on, saying, okay, we see the fruits of this ministry. What can we do now to advance even more?
Yeah. So I think for me, I tend to operate very much with open hands, and I'm like, God, what do you want to do, and where are we going to go today? So I love planning. I love developing like a 10-year plan. But I know if I do that, I know myself, I will go after that plan instead of going after God. And I don't think that that is the place where God has me right now. So I definitely want to make sure that I'm holding my hands wide open and saying, God, where are we going? And so I think for me, instead of saying, I want a house church in every location in South Georgia, what I want to do is say, God, open my eyes to the people who desire to meet together, who have your heart, who have a heart and a desire for this work, and help us cultivate that into new expressions and new communities of faith wherever it is that you're working. And so for me, I want to be the one that's the noticer, and I want to say, God, I see you doing something here. I see you doing something here. I see you doing something here. And then going in and helping to cultivate that new thing. So instead of me directing the work, I call it the first follower. I want to be the first follower, so close on the heels of the Holy Spirit that I'm like, I'm right here, I'm right here, I'm right here. Because I know my tendency, I can be a strong leader, and I'm a very goal-driven person. And so it takes a lot of self-control for me to say, okay, I'm not making this a strategy. My strategy is to notice, God, where are you doing your work? And I'm going to be right there. What is it you're doing, and you're moving in the hearts of people, and I'm going to be right there. So my strategy is noticing where God is working and working with him to plant something new in that area.
So we've got a question, tall, skinny Kiwi, uh, Andrew in New Zealand, I believe. What books are inspiring you and Corey?
Mm. So, so Corey's not a book reader, so he wouldn't even be able to tell you. He wouldn't even be able to tell you that. I think for me, though, one of the books that I have been reading lately is Real Life Discipleship. I'm trying to get. Is it Putnam who's the author of that? I'm looking for it. Here it is. Um, yeah, Jim Putnam. So this is one of the books that I have been using just in my own learning about discipleship. And if you're on YouTube, you can see this is the book, Real Life Discipleship by Jim Putnam. And he really talks about the organic development of a disciple. How are disciples made and how are disciples grown? And I think that that is one of the one of the pieces of work in the microchurch environment that you really can know where all of your people are on this developmental scale. I have a young woman in my home church right now who I actually was in children's ministry whenever this was like probably 15, 20 years ago. She was in my children's ministry and she got, quote, lost from church because once I left that church, she stopped coming and attending. And she contacted me through digital means about a year ago. And she said, Miss Ann, what are you doing? Because I want you to know I found Jesus. I found Jesus and I want you to know because you were the only one in my life who really showed me Jesus. And
Wow.
so now she's in her mid 20s, mid to late 20s, and she has started to come to home church and she is very new. And I remember the first time that she walked into home church, she was just like, man, I found Jesus a couple of months ago, but what I was missing was his people. Like I was missing his people. And it's just so neat to be able to see her growing and you see the progression of that faith. But then we also have people that are in their 70s that are in our home church. And to see their maturity helping to grow someone who is new to faith and figuring it out is just such a beautiful thing. And so that's one of the things I love about this book. But then also I would say just generally, I absolutely love the the emotionally healthy spirituality series by Pete Scazzaro. I think that that is such a healthy way to think about spiritual growth and development, to think about discipleship. And I also, when I teach discipleship classes, I do a lot of training here. I have a required reading of How People Grow by Townsend and Cloud that is also really, really great at helping think through how to help people grow. So not so much reading about microchurch as a model, but just really reading about discipleship and what does that look like on a very close relational level.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that's like regular for the um, home church leaders? Like, how do you continue to equip them with all these resources to the discipleship, right? And equip them to actually keep doing the ministry that they're doing.
Yeah. So that's my job in terms of being on staff with the conference, is that I do lay leadership development. So that is one of the things that we do on a conference wide level. But also, in addition to that, and even more importantly than that, the equipper of the home church leader is the pastor of the established church. And so it is that relationship that is really, really important. Because that's the thing that in an ongoing way helps to sustain and helps to train and helps to troubleshoot any kind of pastoral issues that arise. So the pastor of that host church really has to be a coach and someone that develops other leaders. They have to have this this mindset of leadership development in all that they do. So yes, that is my job overall in our conference, but even more so, we pair these home churches with good, strong host church leaders that can help lead them and equip them well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really good. In terms of uh, this established churches, um, how's the conversation like when you like? Do you approach them saying, "Hey, we got this plan for, quote unquote expansion, which is just like expansion of the kingdom." Uh, how do they receive this option? And I know you said before some churches just don't have the infrastructure for it, but do they like the idea in general? And if they do, how do they embrace and how what do they offer to you in terms of their resources to say, yeah, let's make this work?
Yeah. So we actually have an application that our host churches fill out to apply to be a host church. And part of that process is that they take this change readiness assessment, because we want the people on that whole leadership team, so church council, board, whatever you want to call it. We want all of those people to understand that this is going to require a change in your thinking. You cannot continue to do things the way that you've done things. Once you have a a home church, then you are the equipping church. You're the sending church. So you've got to begin to think differently about the ministries that you do. So for instance, with like Encounter Church and us, we combine forces and combine energy and strategies when we talk about missions. So all of us are working together, coordinating with this one sponsorship organization. So when we do something as Encounter Church, we're doing it, they're doing it. And you begin to think about things. It's not just about your one established church. It's now that you have this sister church or this little baby church over here, and you're helping to equip them, not necessarily in your culture and your context, but in their culture and their context. And so that is what makes it required for people to have a bigger open mindset, because it's not, well, you do things the way that we do things. It's let's have a conversation about how you can do something similar that links up to the way that we are currently doing things. So they take that change readiness assessment and then they work together to complete an online application. And there have been people that have applied to be host churches that are not ready yet. And so
Hmm.
we didn't open that option up to them because they weren't ready. I came in and did some training with them to kind of see where they were. But we want to make sure that when we are launching a new home church, that we launch with a good, healthy DNA of that established church. Because we don't want to have toxic DNA multiply itself, right? We want to have healthy DNA multiply itself. And so that's what we do when we are trying to figure out what that kind of the mindset of that host church. And so we talk about, what is your vision? What does discipleship mean to you? What challenges do you see in your discipleship? What would it look like if you multiplied your discipleship? So we begin to get them thinking about some of these things. So if the whole church doesn't embrace it, then it's not going to be a win. It can't just be, oh, this pastor is really passionate about it, but the church hates it. No, that's not going to be a win. So everybody has got to embrace it holistically.
For the most part, like when the churches you're talking to, are they receptive to the idea? Are they antagonistic to it? Like what's the go-to response in general?
So for us, we don't ask people to be a host church. So there's no antagonism, because they come to us and say, I want to be a host church.
Gotcha.
So it is something that they reach out to us on. Now, there have been a couple of times that I have gone to people and say, hey, have you considered this? And they're like, I have. And they just needed a little tap, but then they needed to have the conversation with their leadership teams. But this is not something holistically that we say everybody's got to do and apply for. And it's a get to. If you want to do it, you get to do it, and we'll have a conversation about it. So generally, the people who apply to do this are people that get it, who have that kingdom mindset and a
Yeah.
desire to help somebody launch something new.
And about how many churches right now are sending churches, are multiplying, are sponsoring churches? How
Yeah,
many do you
we
have
have about
active?
5 right now that are doing that work.
Man,
Hmm.
that's great.
Yeah.
Like when you're telling me a lead pastor, a lead communicator sitting in front of a camera, recording video specific for 2 or 3 house churches, I'm like, holy cow. I mean, that's somebody with a high level of buy-in on this, and like that to me speaks volumes. And so I'm very excited even to hear, yeah, there are 5 churches that are thinking multiplication mindset here and doing something, at the micro level. So this is beautiful.
Yeah. It really is. And one of the things also that James does when he does the video is he's like, hey, so glad to see you. James P. Owens here and Brunswick Home Church coming for you next week. We're going to do something together. It's going to be great. Like we're going to have a shared event. And so he just kind of gives us a little shout out. He'll
Yeah,
say something about go dogs, or he'll say something, just kind of some little personal stuff, and everybody's watching, but he knows specifically that we are watching. And
yeah,
so that really helps us to feel seen and known in that moment.
yeah.
Yeah. It really helps
I
us
mean,
be.
when I was doing micro, I was the digital pastor, online pastor, and so like I would do intros and outros and like help frame the message and tailor it, help apply it at the micro level,
Yeah.
and I was doing the same thing.
Mhm.
Like as much as I could, try to tie in the language of the people that was there, and even like mentioning the leader or some of the people that I knew were in the house church, and talking to them directly through the camera, and helping them be seen and known, where they're not lost in the shuffle of the mega. And I know in Joey's story, the relational aspect, being able to connect with at the personal. Actually, that's a question. Do you have anybody that's preaching at the house church level, like within the house church, or is everybody receiving video?
So, I'm actually a licensed local pastor, so I could preach every Sunday. But one of the things that I think is important for us is that we remain connected to our host church. And so, for me, I would much rather us receive that same instruction from James and maintain that connection. And then for me to come in and add something to it after the fact in our conversation. Than for me to say, here's what it is. And, I just love the alignment. So right
Yeah,
now, we don't have anyone that is, that's preaching live in terms of their home church. Doesn't mean that it couldn't happen someday. I know that it has happened to us when things have gone wrong with the tech, and I'm like, well, here's today's message. But one of the things I also love that helps us to remain connected that I did not mention is that we have a Facebook messenger chat of all of our home church people and of James and Sarah, the 2 staff members at Encounter. And so when things are going on during the week, when things are happening, when somebody needs prayer, whatever, that goes in the home church chat, and James and Sarah are able to engage with that. And so
wow,
that also helps us to remain connected throughout the week, and it helps James to do pastoral care with all of us, and for us to keep, they'll even drop in the chat, hey, this person from Rinkin Encounter is dealing with this, will you pray for them, those kinds of things. So it really does help us to remain connected, and it means a lot when James comes into the chat and contributes to the things that we're talking about. And some of them are just fun little memes and stories about things and life and all of that, but then that's the dailiness of discipleship that we're able to cultivate there.
yeah,
Jeff, I'm
so good.
here listening to Ann, and I'm thinking for people watching or listening, this episode is a great example, perfect example of how the established church can really partner with MicroChurch, um, and can work. Like it can really advance the kingdom in a very in harmony, which is I think is so important, because I think it's important for the established church to see this, to see there's opportunities out there that they can engage with, and they can support, and they can um, see ministry from a whole different angle. What happens in the church, in the established church, is very important, but there are things happening outside that also are important, and this shows that the church can be part of it. It doesn't have to be two separate entities. So that I think that's so important for people to realize and to notice as they watch this conversation and they listen to this conversation, that there's so much value in the word that not many churches like to talk about it, but the way that Jeff opened up this conversation to talk about innovation is just like it's okay for the church to be innovative and to say,
Yeah.
hey, let's just advance the kingdom. It's going to look different, and that's fine. Man, I'm so appreciative of this conversation because it's incredibly encouraging. Like Jeff, I know how Jeff's feeling because I mean that's extremely encouraging to hear what you're sharing, and it's very very encouraging.
Yeah, and Anne's always encouraging. She's one of the highlights when I actually get the chance to talk with her. It's great. Anne, your house church and the host church. How much does the host church spend a year, a month on? Like, it can't be much of anything. Just maybe streaming technology. Like, what's the cost?
So in our case, absolutely nothing. So they bought us a church sign. We do have a church sign that we put out in our front yard that we put out. Encounter Church meets here 10 o'clock on Sundays. So in case anybody in my neighborhood is wondering why is Ann partying at 10 o'clock on Sundays, all the cars and everything. It's our other
That's
home
funny.
church in Albany has the same thing. So there's an investment of a church sign. But no, there's not a financial cost. Especially when you look at the fact that Encounter Church is preparing a service just for us. So that's not even streaming. So, just whatever digital technology is available, which you can use a cell phone. So, I want people to hear that there is not an expense and there's not some sort of a technological bar that you have to meet in order to do this well.
Hmm.
If you don't do live streaming well, then do what Encounter Church does and do that little separate video. Because you can do that separate video with a close angle on your face with a cell phone and put it together, and you've got a video. So
Yeah.
so when you look at the live streaming piece, you definitely need to do live streaming well in order for a home church to be using that as their worship environment. So I would say that is a little bit of cost if that's going to be your model. But if you're doing live streaming anyway, you need to do it well or just not at all, because it's not
Right.
going to be helpful if you don't do it well. And you don't have clear sound, you don't have clear video. It's just not helpful. And so if you're going to do live streaming, do it well, but there's no additional cost. I mean, I'm the one that cleans the sanctuary. I'm the one that washes the dishes. I'm the one that makes the coffee. We're the ones that provide all of the stuff. I think Encounter Church bought us those little K-cup communion cups whenever we were using those, and they bought us Advent candles. So that's the expense. Advent candles, because we
Advent
have a
candles and sippy cup communion. Very good.
exactly.
I mean, my the larger point is like it's time is what Encounter Church is giving. Like the pastor sitting in front of a camera, talking direct to the audience, and at the house church. It's not money, and so to run an experiment, yeah, sacrifice some time, see what you get. Oh, hey, the payoff is good, and as this continues to grow and expand and multiply, the church is my gut is the church is going to be rewarded for the diligence with the experiment encounter. And I love, to echo Joey, I love what you're doing, and even just the willingness to engage, to try something different, and to bring I mean, because you could have done this without Encounter. Like I know you, Ann. You're smart enough to be able to pull this off. But even let's bring some physical churches along and grow them in the process and utilize them is a wise move. And I'm really impressed by how this is. So, Ann, thank you for encouraging for the second time today. Thank you for encouraging me. Just as we're seeing that there are some physical churches that are thinking outside the box and that you are um, doing something different to continue to reach different people. So
Well, thank you guys
great.
for letting
Hey,
me share.
totally. As we're landing the plane, Ann, any closing thoughts on your side?
I don't think so. No, just you can connect with me on Facebook if you have any questions about home church and you want to hear more. I am Anne, Anne Bosarge on Facebook, and you can get me on Messenger there. I'm also on TikTok, and you can contact me there as well. I'd love to give you all more information about what we do in South Georgia with home churches.
What do you do on TikTok?
I do daily
You like
devotionals.
doing the groove daily devotionals?
Oh no,
Okay,
you
that
won't
makes
see
more
me
sense.
dancing. You will
Okay,
not
I was
see me
about to
dancing.
say.
I've got my cup of coffee and the Word of God, and today's reading is every day. So if you want to,
Very cool.
do devotions with me, meet me on TikTok.
On TikTok. Very cool. Joey, any closing thoughts?
No, I just want to thank Ann again. Jeff, thanks. Great conversation. I get my notifications on Facebook every time Ann goes for a prayer at the chapel, and I'm tuning in. I mean, just it's just a really amazing uh, to be able to follow Ann and
Mm,
see what God's doing through her ministry, through her family. Man, I'm living this conversation incredibly encouraged to keep doing what we're doing, and we know that we'll be praying for you, praying for the ministry, what God's doing, and then cannot wait to hear next few months, years, what God's going to do through it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Between chapel online, digital discipleship, this micro, there's a lot of kingdom wins coming
Yes.
out of Southern
Oh
Georgia.
yeah.
So impressed. And so thank you, Ann, for the time. Thanks, Joey, for hanging out. We're gonna wrap up here for wait. That's a church. Thanks for coming, hanging out with us. Tall, skinny, digital hexagon. Anybody else? Sumi Beats. Everybody else? Melanie, that was hanging out with us. Thank you very much. I think I saw you, Kaylee, ukulele worship in there, maybe somebody else. But for all of you, thanks for hanging out. We're going to land the plane for Ann, for Joey. This is Jeff with the Church Digital. Thanks. And we'll see you next time here on the show. Y'all have a good one.